The restaurant industry is one of the many to be hit hard by the coronavirus pandemic. More than 100,000 restaurants have already closed permanently. And as cases surge and weather gets colder, many establishments have to find other revenue streams to stay afloat. For more now, I want to bring in Annie Shih, who's co-owner of King Restaurant in New York City. Annie, thank you for joining us. As our regular viewers are aware, New York City has cracked down on restaurants and bars in an effort to get the health crisis under control, closing at one point both indoor and outdoor dining. So how have these regulations made it difficult for you to keep your business afloat?
Well, there have been so many changes. It's hard to keep track of where we're at. At one point, we had indoor and outdoor open. Then there was a curfew for 10 p.m. closures. Now there's no indoor dining. Last week, we obviously had a huge snowstorm. We were forced to close outdoor dining on that day as well. So it just means that we are not able to make up the money that we're losing. A lot of restaurants that I know of have had to fire up to 80% of their staff with indoor dining shut. And this is happening right before the holiday season with no restaurant-specific aid coming from the government. And it's a real punch to the gut. It kind of feels like the government doesn't understand or doesn't care about restaurant industries and restaurant workers. And we really need the help. It's going to be a dark 3 months before we can make it to spring. And I know it feels like for a lot of us that there's a chance we won't make it to spring. So these regulations are making it hard for us to survive.
Well, as you mentioned, Annie, the latest bipartisan stimulus package does not include the $120 billion Restaurants Act. That Restaurants Act would have established a fund for food service or drinking establishments that aren't public companies or part of a chain that has 20 or more locations under one name. So a restaurant like yours, I think we're really hoping that that would come through for you. With it now not part of this compromise package, do you worry about your ability to keep your business up and running?
100%. In an ideal world, we would be able to pay our staff so that they can stay home and stay safe and wait until spring and pay our rent. But without this aid, we're forced to stay open. There are many days where we're actually losing money by staying open, and everyone's in the same boat. In previous drafts of this bill, we've seen industry-specific aid for airlines, for museums and live venues. So if that does end up happening, it'll be, just a massive, it would feel like betrayal almost, for them to say that the airline industry is more important than the 11 million restaurant workers who are the ones without safety nets, who are working through a pandemic without health care, who have to work in order to pay rent, support their families, pay for school, pay off debt. I mean, it's incredibly unfair. So we are still hoping that in the future there is a Restaurant Act, but it is seeming like Congress will not be passing that.
Well, you mentioned your staff and the difficulty of having to lay off people and make these announcements before the holidays. I'm wondering what that has been like for you, if you're looking at 2021 and are hopeful about your ability to bring people back on, or do you think that the employees that you've lost are really lost to you for good?
We really hope we can. These are people that we view as family that we spend all of our time with, but until we are back at 100% capacity for indoor dining, it is unlikely that we will be able to rehire. We have people who have moved out of New York City because it's simply too expensive for them to live here, and those guys are not going to come back. ROAR has been tirelessly fighting, raising money for a restaurant relief fund, which a lot of our staff have been applying to, but without a full-time job, it's just simply impossible to live in New York. And these are people who are not necessarily going to be absorbed by other industries. These are people who are still on unemployment because there are no restaurant jobs to be had.
Annie, if you don't mind, I wanted to share with our viewers that before we started this interview, you were telling me about your passion and what brought you to open a restaurant when you were young and the world seemed full of possibility. Sitting here now at the end of 2020, with all that you've been through, with all of your money and your sweat and your tears and everything poured into your business, do you wish that you'd gone a different route in life? How are you feeling as you look back on this year?
I don't think my business partners and I could have ever imagined that we would be weathering a crisis like this. I think that's true for most business owners. But would I choose to do things differently? Absolutely not. It is the most incredible industry. People only go into it because they love what they do, because they love taking care of people. You don't do it for the money because the margins aren't there. But I absolutely love guests, our staff. I'm so proud to be an employer, to be able to take care of them and provide for them as much as we can. And I wouldn't have it any other way, even knowing what I do now about 2020.
All right, Annie Shih, thank you for joining us, and an impassioned plea for people who love their local restaurants to support them in any way that they can, and to let Congress know how you feel as well. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.